Morning, and welcome back to our series on how to use the polling observation form for the 2025 MK and LLG elections observation. In this section, we're going to be looking at the voting method page. This is possibly the hardest part of the form to fill, but it's also the most important. The voting method is the basic way that the polling is taking place in a polling station. It's the difference between people lining up and having their names checked and voting in an orderly fashion, and there being a huge scramble to grab ballots or even a box hijack. We want to try to record what is happening in a polling station at 4 different times. We want to first look at what's happening at 9 o'clock. That's, should be about at least half an hour after the polling station opens. And then we want to look again at 12 o'clock, bello, and then at 3 p.m. and at closing. At each one of those times, we're going to choose from one of these lists of one of these options in this form. And we're going to select only one option for each time slot. So let's say that at 9 a.m., I'm watching the polling station and they have just started polling and they're doing everything by the book. There's a line, everyone is being identified, and they vote in their time of, they're voting by themselves as individuals. Then we select this option here and we leave everything else blank. Later on in the day, comes to just before lunchtime, 12 o'clock, we notice that it's more or less like it was before, but now they're not really enforcing the role very well. They're letting a lot of people through without having their names checked. Then I'm going to choose the normal weak roll compliance option. Let's say I wait a little bit longer and it's now 3 p.m. And what I find is that, well, they realized that what they were doing was wrong and have gone back to using the roll correctly. So we put down 3 p.m. normal full roll compliance. Finally, at the closing of the polling station, we think about how it was being organized just before and around the time of closing, and we say that they stuck doing the right thing to the end. They had a bump in the middle, and then they went back to doing the right thing. That's what we would expect to see in an average polling station. They mostly do the right thing, but sometimes there's a little bump like that. Now, it's not always the case that polling stations work that well. There might be other things that happen. Sometimes polling stations don't use the roll properly. For instance, individuals might line up and everything about the polling station might be quite orderly, but no one's name is really being checked. Then we use no, if we see that right in the morning at 9 a.m., we're going to put no voter ID individual. Individual voters are being given ballots and they're voting by themselves, voting as individuals, but they not having their names identified. So we tick that. Let's say that's happening right off the bat. Not always a good sign, but let's say that that continues on throughout the day. It's just the same thing through the whole day. They just never used the roll and just kept doing that. As you see, for each time slot, we use only one option. Now let's consider like some other possibilities here. We arrive at the polling station and we keep waiting for them to start, but it's taking them forever to get started. So 9 a.m. comes and goes and it's now 10 o'clock and they still haven't started the process. Then we're going to choose this option down the bottom here. No ballot filling activity. That means that there's no sort of voting happening in this polling station. It's just running late. Then they start and, well, by 12 o'clock, there's just a normal polling station now. And then they just continue the day like that. So if the polling station has if nothing is happening there at 9 a.m., we're going to select the no ballot filling activity for that option. There are many other options that we can also select for possibilities that are not very often seen at the NCD or else. And these include, say, if there is a scramble for ballots, if people just all run to try to grab ballots and no one seems to be in charge of the polling station. The hijack of a polling box, we would really hope we don't see that. But if that happens, the possibility to record it is here. One thing that we might see are roll calls, where they sing out their whole name or call out the names of all people. If they are calling out names and following the roll, then we would choose roll call with identification. We find that this is often what happens at the beginning of the day when there's a lot of people there, and to prevent there being a big mess, they try to follow the roll using a roll call. So let's say it's 9 o'clock in the morning, they're calling out the names at this time. And they keep doing this until midday. Later on the day, there's just not really anyone hanging around, so people can just come and vote whenever they want. They've stopped calling the names, so the polling station changes what it was doing. That can be happening. Sometimes when people call out the names, and one of the reasons that we wouldn't see that as a particularly good way to run an election is that you call out the name and there's a pressure to allow that person to vote or to find somebody who will answer that name. Otherwise, things slow down a lot. What happens then is that people step forward to vote with someone else's name, and everyone is relieved because otherwise the thing stops and no voting happens. That pressure to allow people to vote in other people's names is called proxy voting. If there is proxy voting, where people are stepping forward and voting, being called up, and people are stepping forward to vote using other people's names, then we would use this option here. They're similar things. They might look very similar, but they have quite different implications. So keep an eye out to see whether people are in fact being checked to vote against the roll. Another thing that can happen is that there can be sort of next voting. This is more of a Highlands practice, where it's something that looks a little bit like a roll call, but in fact, they're just sort of getting people to come forward. There's not really any effort to mark their names against the roll. Any kind of voting that doesn't in fact use the roll at all goes into this no ID individual section here. So for the roll call, but where they're mostly using the roll, but they are letting some people vote with other people's names or just letting them through it. There's the occasional leak, they're leaking through the roll. Then we choose roll call with proxies. If they're not using the roll at all, we'll use no voter ID individual. It is possible that there could be things that happen towards the end of the day. So we'll see a polling station where the officials are in fact complying with the law. They're checking everybody's name at the beginning, during the day. Everything is going really well. But then at the end of the day, the people who were not allowed to vote, they get to vote with the leftover ballots. This is a very common thing to see. The leftover ballots get used in a way differently from the others. What should happen to them is that they should return to the returning officer, be packed away and not find their way into the ballot box. But sometimes we find that presiding officers feel sorry for the voters, or the voters overpower the presiding officers and end up being able to vote. Those are the main things we expect to see in an NCD context. We do not expect to see the use of pre-filled ballots, but just so that you know what these things mean, a pre-filled ballot, the option down here, that is where officials themselves mark the ballots in some form. They vote, or supporters are given the bundle of ballots to fill first, and then this is given to the voter. The voter basically gets to choose option 2 and 3, or maybe no option at all. That is a very, very, very severe departure from what should happen. It is not expected to happen in the NCD. Should it happen, it's very important to make a note of that. Another possibility is that there is full control of the polling station. In a situation like that, only supporters fill the ballots. There is, really no capacity for the community to participate in any real form. And there's a difference between that and a block vote where people agree that they're going to vote in one way or they're coerced outside of the polling station. What's happening in a controlled polling station is that they are physically unable to vote. That's the difference. It's also possible the polling station will be destroyed. That is seen. We don't expect to see this in an NCD context, but should it happen, you can make a note over here. And we have a threshold, or the standard for us is that one ballot box is destroyed. So the polling station still has one ballot box and is voting on that one, but one of them was destroyed. We say that it has been destroyed. Same thing for hijacks. We don't expect to see those, but should that happen, please make a note of that. Group voting, this option here, is something that is much more common in places like Enga, where clans vote together. There's a big difference between a group vote in the sense that we are talking about here and a block vote like we might often see in the islands or in southern region. In a block vote, people make a decision to vote in a certain way. That decision might be coercive. It might be that women are forced to vote the same way as their uncles or fathers or husbands have told them to vote. But at the polling station, they vote as individuals. Okay? In a group vote, in the sense that is being used here, the ballots themselves are given to the family to fill together, and often that means the men get to vote and the women get to sit around. But it's a very different situation. A block vote, like we might see in the islands or southern region, where a decision is made that the whole family is going to vote for one person, and then they each vote individually for that person. That kind of block vote might have lots of problems, but that's a different set of issues to the ones that we are observing in this context. We're looking for what happens to the actual ballot papers. If the ballots are being used individually, then we're going to choose one of these options here where there's individual voting, whether it's a roll call, whether they're queuing up, or whether they are in fact just voting without using the roll. Whatever you see during the day, always make sure to have the one option per column. So one for 9 a.m., one for 12 p.m., one for 3 p.m., and one for closing. Just choose one option only. In the section below, where we have got some space to fill in our comments, please make sure that you have got some, please make sure that you describe what you see, particularly if the options in the form don't quite match what you saw on the day. Please describe what you saw. And that concludes it for the voting methods. Let's continue on.